Human emotions often appear sudden and irrational, as if they arise out of nowhere. But in most cases, emotions are not born from chaos. They are attached to behavior. When someone does something that affects us, our mind instantly translates that behavior into intention, meaning, and threat. Only then do emotions ignite. Consider a simple example. Imagine you lent your car to someone, and they kept it much longer than you expected. You feel angry, disrespected, and even taken advantage of. But the moment you discover the delay was due to a mechanical problem that stranded them on the road, the anger evaporates almost instantly. The situation didn't change, only the interpretation did. This reveals an important psychological mechanism. Emotions follow meaning, and meaning follows behavior. When we cannot clearly interpret someone's behavior, our brain fills the gap with assumptions, and assumptions rarely flatter others. Our mind tends to assume neglect, disrespect, or hostile intention long before it considers benign explanations. This is not because we are unkind, but because uncertainty feels dangerous. The more our brain struggles to infer what a behavior means, the stronger the emotional reaction becomes. Human relationships aren't shaped by behavior alone. They're shaped by the invisible interpretation that rides on top of behavior. If emotions follow meaning, then a natural question arises. What creates meaning in the first place? Psychologists point to reinforcement, the system through which the brain learns what behaviors matter, what behaviors threaten us, and what behaviors reward us. Reinforcement can happen through pleasure, attention, validation, or access to desired outcomes. Once the brain identifies a pattern, it begins to build emotional shortcuts. Over time, the shortcut becomes so automatic that it feels like instinct. Take, for example, sibling jealousy. Imagine a younger sister who desperately wants the attention and approval of an older sister. If for months the older sister spends more time with someone else, the younger sister may start to interpret every act of separation as rejection. One day when the older sister plans to go out alone, the younger sibling explodes into tears. The behavior itself is trivial, going out, but the meaning attached to it is dramatic. She's leaving me again. From the outside, this looks irrational. From the inside, it is perfectly logical. The emotional trigger isn't the outing, it's the pattern. When a pattern becomes associated with loss, exclusion, or humiliation, the brain reacts fiercely to protect dignity and belonging. Our emotional life is shaped less by what happens and more by what the event stands for inside our private story. But there is another layer. Once reinforcement builds an association, removing the trigger does not immediately remove the emotion. Emotional learning lingers. This is why people can react strongly to small things while appearing calm toward larger ones. The size of the event does not matter. The reinforcement history does. Most people assume that training is something we do to animals, not to other humans. But human relationships are full of reinforcement loops. We simply don't notice them because they are not deliberate. When someone responds to our actions in a consistent way, their reaction becomes feedback about how we should behave in the future. If a person becomes anxious every time someone is late and demands immediate explanations, others may eventually adjust their punctuality not out of respect, but to avoid the anxiety. Conversely, if someone rewards kindness, attention, or responsibility with warmth and trust, people may spontaneously increase those behaviors. In this way, relationships become invisible classrooms where each person teaches the other how to act. Consider workplace lateness. If an employee repeatedly arrives late and the manager complains loudly but ultimately does nothing, The employee learns that the punishment is merely noise, not consequence. The yelling becomes part of the routine. It changes nothing. But if the manager calmly implements a rule, adjusts schedules, or ties punctuality to real outcomes, the reinforcement becomes effective. Behavior changes not because of emotion, but because of structure. The surprising truth is that many emotional conflicts persist, not because people cannot change, but because the reinforcement system rewards the very behavior that causes pain. People unintentionally strengthen the behaviors they dislike by reacting in ways that make those behaviors profitable for the other side. We don't just suffer from each other, we shape each other. If reinforcement teaches the brain what to expect, then uncertainty becomes the absence of reinforcement, and few things disturb the human mind more than not knowing. Imagine calling a coworker regarding an urgent task. They promise to call you back in 10 minutes. 15 minutes pass, nothing. You decide to wait. 30 minutes pass, still nothing. You resist calling again because you don't want to appear demanding, but your mind is no longer calm. It begins to simulate scenarios. Did they forget? Are they stuck? Did something go wrong? Are they ignoring me on purpose? None of these thoughts are confirmed, yet they carry emotional weight. Uncertainty opens space for imagination, and imagination rarely fills the void with neutral explanations. Eventually you call back, only to learn that your coworker had been suddenly pulled into another meeting and simply couldn't return the call. Your anxiety dissolves instantly, not because the situation improved, but because the uncertainty ended. To the mind, an unpleasant certainty is often less stressful than an undefined possibility. This pattern shows up everywhere. When someone doesn't reply to a message, when a doctor delays giving results, when a partner becomes distant, or when a friend cancels plans without explanation. In each case, people are not reacting to facts, but to the vacuum around the facts. The brain evolved for survival, not comfort, and survival requires predicting threats. So when predictions fail, emotions intensify, not because danger exists, but because danger cannot be ruled out. Understanding how reinforcement and uncertainty drive behavior gives us an unusual insight into control. Control does not mean dominating others. It means creating conditions where cooperation is more rewarding than resistance. If you want someone to behave a certain way, lecturing them rarely works. Lectures aim at judgment. Reinforcement aims at incentives. The mind responds far more reliably to incentives than to moral argument. People don't change because we tell them to. People change when the new behavior works for them, the old behavior stops paying off, and uncertainty is reduced enough for them to act. This explains why anxiety spikes when expectations are unclear, why resentment grows when meaning is misunderstood, and why relationships become smoother when reinforcement aligns. To cooperate with others, it is not enough to know what we want from them. We must understand what they need to cooperate. Cooperation is less about shared morality and more about shared predictability.